I'm Miss Melissa at the Oosterhout Free Library with our next installment of Elodie, the Lamb Fairy, from the popular Rainbow Magic series. She's a farm animal fairy. This is written by Daisy Meadows and published by Scholastic. The lambs on the farm are acting like cats, so Elodie turned the girls into fairies so they could work together to try to fix this. They were scooped up on magical puffy clouds and swept into the air. The little lamb rose onto its hind legs to watch them. It batted at them with its front hooves, but the little clouds whisked them out of reach. Then the clouds melted away and Elodie joined them. Together they zoomed up over the sheep pasture. "Look down there," said Rachel. "The lambs are in the pasture." Now that they had a good view, they could see 4 lambs in the pasture. 2 of them were rolling around together, play fighting. Another lamb was busy chasing a leaf that was dancing in the breeze, pouncing on it and freeing it over and over again. The 4th lamb was scratching at the newly painted fence. "That's just what we were afraid of," said Kirsty. "They're all acting like cats." The lambs were meowing so loudly that the fairies could hear them clearly, even from high above. The sheep in the pasture were staying away from the lambs and giving them some very confused looks. When the leaf-chasing lamb got too close, one of the sheep let out a loud, grumpy baa. The lambs were startled by the loud noise. They all jumped up onto the pasture fence, balanced there for a moment, and then jumped down and ran off toward the farm. "Oh, no," said Kirsty. "How are we going to get them back?" She and Elodie watched in a panic as the lambs scattered. Rachel was still looking all around, hoping to be lucky enough to spot Fluffy. There was no magical lamb in sight, but there was someone down in a grove of trees at the bottom of the pasture. He was wearing bright green overalls and tall rubber boots, and he was looking up into a tree. "Who's that?" Rachel asked. "It doesn't look like Niall. Are there any other people working on the farm this week, Kirsty?" Kirsty looked where Rachel was pointing, and her mouth fell open. "That's not a grown-up," she said. "It's not even a human. Look at his enormous boots. That's a goblin." The goblin seemed to be calling to someone in the tree. "Come on," said Elodie. "Let's go and find out what he's doing. He's one of Jack Frost's goblins, so I'll bet you anything he's up to mischief." Rachel, Kirsty, and Elodie flew down toward the grove of trees. As they got closer, they saw a magical glow through the leaves. "There's something in the tree," said Kirsty. "Oh, Elodie, I think it's Fluffy." The magical little lamb was balancing on a low branch. She looked alone and confused. "Fluffy!" Elodie called. Fluffy was startled, and she jumped down from the branch in a panic. She landed in the goblin's arms, and he gave a loud squawk of delight. "You do want to cuddle me," he said. "You're so soft and sweet. I want more cuddles. I want all the cuddles." He squeezed her so tightly that she started to squirm and wriggle in his arms. Seconds later, she twisted away from him and dashed off. "Come back!" he shouted. "Fluffy!" Elodie cried out. The goblin charged after the little lamb, stumbling with every step he took in his massive boots. Fluffy pressed her belly to the grass and crawled under the shrubbery behind the grove of trees. "We have to follow her," said Rachel, zooming into the greenery. Elodie and Kirsty flew after her, but by the time they caught up, Fluffy had completely disappeared. They heard a goblin crashing into the bushes behind them. Kirsty and Rachel looked at each other in dismay. How were they going to get Fluffy back now? Rachel looked around and spotted a few tufts of Fluffy's wool clinging to the undergrowth. "A trail," she said. "Maybe we can follow it. It just might lead us to Fluffy, just like the breadcrumbs in the story Hansel and Gretel." "That's a brilliant idea," said Elodie, clapping her hands together. "Quickly, there's not a moment to lose. We can't let Fluffy disappear again." Staying low and flitting through the undergrowth, the fairies hunted for the little wisps of glowing white wool. Here and there they found them clinging to twigs and caught on thorns. Rachel picked up each piece and held them all in her hand. The trail led them through the shrubbery, over to a bush, and when they peeked underneath, they saw Fluffy, curled up like a cat. Elodie put her finger to her lips, and they all backed away from the bush. "We have to be very careful," she whispered. "Now that we've found her, we can't risk frightening her again." "Maybe she would come if we had a cat toy," said Kirsty, remembering that they had used a toy to help them get Splashy, the duckling, back. Rachel looked down at the tufts of Fluffy's glowing wool in her hand. "Wool," she said. "That reminds me. Cats love balls of yarn. They will chase them for hours. Could you make a ball of yarn, Elodie?" Elodie flicked her wand, and instantly Rachel was holding a large ball of soft blue yarn. "Perfect," said Rachel. "We will need to be human for this." With another wave of her wand, Elodie turned the girls back into humans once again. "This shrubbery suddenly seems a lot more cramped and prickly," said Kirsty with a quiet laugh. "Okay, Rachel, I'm ready. It's time to get Fluffy." Rachel flashed her a thumbs up. Kneeling down, Rachel rolled the ball of yarn toward the little lamb, keeping hold of one end of the yarn. The ball nudged up against Fluffy's nose, and she opened one eye. Kirsty and Rachel crossed their fingers, but Fluffy just closed her eyes again. Rachel pulled the ball of yarn back toward her. "Let me try," said Kirsty. She rolled the yarn ball, and it bumped up against Fluffy's hoof. Again, one of her eyes flickered for a moment, but she was just not interested. Kirsty pulled the yarn back to herself. The girls heard a rustling sound behind them. What's the rustling sound? We'll find out next time.